Politics by Aristotle, a treatise on government, translated by William Ellis.
Read and presented by George Pitropagianakis.
Book 1, Chapter 2.
Now, if in this particular science anyone would attend to its original, seeds, and their first shoot, he would then, as in others, have the subject perfectly before him, and perceive, in the first place, that it is requisite that those should be joined together whose species cannot exist without each other, as the male and the female, for the business of propagation, and this not through choice, but by that natural impulse, which acts both upon plants and animals also, for the purpose of their leaving behind them others like themselves. It is also from natural causes that some beings command and others obey, that each may obtain their mutual safety. For a being who is endowed with a mind capable of reflection and forethought is by nature the superior and governor, whereas he whose excellence is merely corporeal is formed to be a slave. Whence it follows that the different state of master and slave is equally advantageous to both. But there is a natural difference between a female and a slave, for nature is not like the artists who make the Delphic swords for the use of the poor, but for every particular purpose she has her separate instruments, and thus her ends are most complete, for whatsoever is employed on one subject only brings that one to much greater perfection than when employed on many. And yet, among the barbarians, a female and a slave are upon a level in the community, the reason for which is that amongst them there are none qualified by nature to govern. Therefore, their society can be nothing but between slaves of different sexes, for which reason the poets say it is proper for the Greeks to govern the barbarians, as if a barbarian and a slave were by nature one. Now, of these two societies, the domestic is the first, and Hesiod is right when he says, first a house, then a wife, then an ox for the plough. For the poor man has always an ox before a household slave. That society, then, which nature has established for daily support is the domestic, and those who compose it are called by Gerondas homosipoi and by Epimenides the Cretan homokapnoi. But the society of many families, which was first instituted for their lasting mutual advantage, is called a village, and a village is most naturally composed of the descendants of one family, whom some persons call homogalactes, the children and the children's children thereof. For which reason cities were originally governed by kings, as the barbarian states now are, which are composed of those who had before submitted to kingly government. For every family is governed by the elder, as are the branches thereof, on account of their relationship thereunto, which is what Homer says. Each one ruled his wife and child, and in this scattered manner they formerly lived. And the opinion which universally prevails, that the gods themselves are subject to kingly government, arises from hence that all men formerly were, and many are so now. And as they imagined themselves to be made in the likeness of the gods, so they supposed their manner of life must needs be the same. And when many villages so entirely joined themselves together as in every respect to form but one society, that society is a city and contains in itself, if I may so speak, the end and perfection of government, first founded that we might live, but continued that we may live happily, for which reason every city must be allowed to be the work of nature, if we admit that the original society between male and female is, for to this as there, and all subordinate societies tend, and the end of everything is the nature of it. For what every being is in its most perfect state, that certainly is the nature of that being, whether it be a man, a horse, or a house. Besides, whatsoever produces the final cause and the end which we desire must be best, but a government complete in itself is that final cause and what is best. Hence it is evident that a city is a natural production, and that man is naturally a political animal, and that whosoever is naturally and not accidentally unfit for society must be either inferior or superior to man. Thus the man in Homer, who is reviled for being without society, without law, without family, such a one must naturally be of a quarrelsome disposition, and as solitary as the birds. The gift of speech also evidently proves that man is a more social animal than the bees, or any of the herding cattle. For nature, as we say, does nothing in vain, and man is the only animal who enjoys it. Voice, indeed, as being the token of pleasure and pain, is imparted to others also, and thus much their nature is capable of, to perceive pleasure and pain, and to impart these sensations to others. But it is by speech that we are enabled to express what is useful for us, and what is hurtful, and, of course, what is just and what is unjust. For in this particular man differs from other animals, that he alone has a perception of good and evil, of just and unjust, and it is participation of these common sentiments which forms a family and a city. Besides, the notion of a city naturally precedes that of a family, or an individual, for the whole must necessarily be prior to the parts. For if you take away the whole man, you cannot say a foot or a hand remains, unless by equivocation, as supposing a hand of stone to be made, but that would only be a dead one. But everything is understood to be this or that by its energy qualities and powers, so that when these no longer remain, neither can that be said to be the same, but something of the same name. That a city then precedes an individual is plain. For if an individual is not in himself sufficient to compose a perfect government, he is to a city as other parts are to a whole. But he that is incapable of society, or so complete in himself as not to want it, makes no part of a city, as a beast or a god. There is then in all persons a natural impetus to associate with each other in this manner. And he who first founded civil society was the cause of the greatest good, for as by the completion of it man is the most excellent of all living beings, so without law and justice he would be the worst of all, for nothing is so difficult to subdue as injustice in arms. But this arms man is born with, namely prudence and valor, which he may apply to the most opposite purposes, for he who abuses them will be the most wicked, the most cruel, the most lustful, and most gluttonous being imaginable. For justice is a political virtue. By the rules of it, the state is regulated, and these rules are the criterion of what is right.